everybody. We are back today with Cassandra of Saffron Astrology. I'm so glad to have you back. It's been a while.
Thank you. It's glad to be back. Good to be back.
And today we are going to be talking about career in the natal chart. Kind of what to look for in terms of what career might be good for somebody, might fit with their natal chart. Sorry, that is loud. I apologize in advance for any planes that sound like they're about to fall on the fucking house. Um, but we're going to be talking about, career in the natal chart, how to kind of look for that, all that kind of stuff. And Cassandra is actually running a course on career right now. So she's like the perfect person to talk about this with. I'll let you, what do you look for
When
when
it comes
you,
to career,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think of it as kind of a combination between our personality and then our career placements because the career stuff in the chart is not the same as the personality stuff. And I think
Yep.
that sometimes people will have a certain personality that has certain needs that aren't necessarily the same as their career stuff. So I try to combine it. I try to look at the midheaven. I mean, that's the first thing I'm going to look at just for like, what is your job? What do you do? But I'm also going to look at where the planet that rules the midheaven is in the chart to get like the full story, right? Because like every Scorpio midheaven isn't going to do research, right? Every
Yeah.
Sag midheaven isn't going to travel, although a lot of them might. But when
Yeah.
we look at where that planet is, that's when we can see kind of like how that expresses and a little bit more of the details of what the career is.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just for anybody like you look at the planetary ruler of whatever sign is on the midheaven. So like Sagittarius, for instance, you'd be looking at where Jupiter falls in the chart. Um, where if it was Scorpio, you use traditional rulership, you'd be looking at Mars. Modern rulership, you'd be looking at Pluto, or you could do what I do, which is look at both, which kind of gives you more to play with. But you're right about that. Sometimes that seems to get left out, that particular piece. It's just kind of I have my midheaven in this sign or whatever, and yeah, not bringing the rest into play.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's also, I also am going to look at the second house because that's the money house. And then I'm gonna also look at the sixth house because that's like the house of our daily work and our schedule and kind of what we do every day. And it can get just looking at those three places, you can kind of see like, are you going to be more of a workaholic? Are you going to care a lot about people and have work where you're like, more close and connected to people? Or are you going to want to work behind the scenes? I mean, we can see so much just by those three places in the chart and then how those planets interact, whether they're in harmonious relationship or challenges, with the squares or the oppositions. And sometimes I think, if the midheaven ruler isn't doing very good in the chart, then I'm going to look at like the second house and the sixth house to see if they have any other support because they're, it's not like if you have a bad planet, you're totally messed up. I mean, it will cause challenges, but like there's ways to work around this stuff.
Yeah, to where let me ask you this: when you say like, what would you say would be like a challenging thing here?
So, like, let's say someone has their midheaven ruler and it's squaring, getting squared by like Saturn or Mars. Maybe that would probably be like they'd probably have more conflicts to trying to do the work that planet involves. So, like, let's say it was Jupiter and they're trying to teach and like it doesn't work for them or they're not like I don't know. I would have to talk to the person to see how it shows up, but like I would say that would make it more challenging, but it doesn't necessarily mean they can't do it. It would just usually it just validates the natural challenges that person has. So with Jupiter square Mars, maybe they get more pushback when they're teaching. Maybe it doesn't mean they're bad at it or it doesn't work. And then maybe if Saturn's involved, that would just probably mean that person doesn't really get their stride in career until later in life. So they might feel
Mhm.
blocked or they might find that they're not really, doing work they love or work they're good at, or they have to spend more time gaining skills when they're younger that end up paying off when they're older.
Yeah, absolutely. The square could even be, it could even function sometimes as like a catalyst to make things happen. Sometimes, like, it's like, no, I'm gonna fucking do this.
That's such a good point. Yeah. Well, and I think that in general, squares give you more potential if you can overcome the obstacle, because it is sort of like a slingshot or like a trampoline, where it's like if you learn how to direct the energy, it can work really well. But if you don't know
Yeah.
how, it can become internalized, and it can just be a fight within yourself. I want to do this job, but I want to do this job. So I think some of that has to do with if the person's learned how to kind of work with that tension.
Yeah, the working with the tension, I think that's a great way to say that. Like having it work for you instead of against you, kind of, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. But you're so right about that, a lot of times they'll say, like, famous people, they'll have squares, they'll have opposition. So it's not like the square has to stop you, but just that, um, are you going to work through it? Are we going to work through those challenges?
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Another, talking about like squares and stuff. Another challenging thing I've noticed is when like the midheaven is square the planetary ruler of the midheaven.
Mm,
That's another kind
yeah,
of
that makes sense.
that's another kind of again, can be worked with, right? Like, can be like, if you're working with the tension instead of against it. But I have noticed that can be kind of like, it can feel kind of,
Right. Well, okay. So then people with those kind of placements, these are the kind of people who are going to be like, I feel like I'm on the wrong path because every time I try to do this thing, there's all these problems. And it's like having that astrology reading can help them see that, no, that's just how it is for you. You know what I mean? Like, and not to say it has to stay that way, but not interpreting the tension or the challenge as I'm on the wrong path. Because I think some people think that I thought for a long time that if I was on the right path, it would be easy. And then I learned that I have Saturn conjunct the ruler of my midheaven. So I have a challenging planet with my career planet. So it doesn't mean it has to be hard forever, but just that it's probably like whether it's easy or not is not necessarily going to be the indication that it's the right path for someone with a challenging aspect.
yeah, no, that's, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, what, um, and this, because I get people asking about this kind of stuff too. When you, when you get asked questions like this, because I would imagine some people are, when they come to you, they just are asking about like what kind of careers look like they would be good for them. And then there are some people that want to actually know if they're on the right path with the career that they have. When people come to you for that second kind of question, do you kind of like to know what their like skill set kind of is, like, to kind of fit, do you know what I'm trying to ask, like try to fit them with something that they actually have the skills, or the qualifications to do.
It's so funny. I was kind of contemplating this morning a little bit. Usually not as much. I'm usually not looking as much as what they're skilled at. I'm usually looking more at what they have the potential for. Because I think we
Nice.
can build skills.
Yeah.
And so usually, like when someone says, I want to do this thing, am I on the right path? I will look at all the reasons why it's a yes, and I'll look for that. Why you can do this kind of work. If you want to be a therapist, yes, you have planets in the eighth house that challenging planets in the eighth house can make a really good therapist because you can
Mm-hmm.
handle people's darkness, or you know what I mean? So I'll look for whatever potential that person has for that kind of work. And then I'll also tell them the parts they might not enjoy and why. So, like sometimes people don't have the planets that would have them appreciate or want to work in closeness with closeness, with like the same job for 20 years or the same people for a long time, so I'll consider all of those things and just kind of try to help them see what makes it a yes, and then what the challenges might be, and how, and sometimes I'll brainstorm with them like how to work around that.
Yeah. That's, do you, do you ever, and you don't have to name names or give examples or anything, but have you ever had anybody that wanted, they wanted to do something, say for career, and it's just like, you're looking at it and you're like, I don't see this as,
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Okay, sometimes now I have never really had it be like they want to do something so far off base that it's like that I have to reel them in and be like, this is reality over here. But
yeah,
I will tell a person, like, I don't see that in the chart, but I try to make sure they know that, like, that doesn't mean it can't be, right? That I don't ever want to, I actually don't want to say to someone, like, you can't do this. I will tell
I think
them,
that's good.
you might not like it because of this. And this other thing over here, it looks like it might be a little bit easier for you. Like for example, Virgo risings don't usually like to have to come up with all of the rules. Sometimes they do better working within structure rather than
Mhm.
creating the structure. That doesn't mean if someone with the Virgo rising is like, can I work for myself? I wouldn't say no, but I would say you might not like this part of it, or you might need to get some help with this part of it. So
Mhm.
I try not to tell people like what they can and can't do, because I believe that sometimes the person on the other end of that will really, really take it to heart. Like, I don't know how much they're going to really take it to heart. So I don't ever want to be the reason someone doesn't do something they wanted to do. I want them to go out and live and get the experience that, and have the experience tell them whether to do it or not, if that makes sense.
It does, and I agree with that. I'm so Sagittarian of you, by the way. Wanting to give the experience, wanting to have experiences. I understand, totally get it. Yeah, you don't really want to. You don't want to be the person that like pisses in somebody's cornflakes. You know,
Yes. Or
you
even
know what I
just because
mean?
like one of their planets isn't in a good spot. It's like I've had that experience of kind of feeling a little bit insulted by astrologers who are like telling me what's wrong with my planets. And it's like, I don't want that. And everyone, regardless of what information you get about career, you're going to know if you're out there in the world and you're trying to do something, eventually you're going to figure out whether it's right for you or not. So I think that
Yeah,
we have to combine astrology with like action. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want someone
yeah,
coming to me and being like, and I guess, this reminds me of, occasionally I get someone who comes to me and they're like, I want to do this thing. And I'm like, have you done anything like that? No. And it's like they haven't done anything to try to like approach that topic. They just want me to tell them whether it's the right path. And I'm very hesitant to even answer those kind of questions, because I feel like I'm not God, even though I can see what the
mhm,
chart says. And sometimes it's really, really obvious this person is supposed to do this thing. When it's not like 1,000% clear, I'm more err on the side of, I don't like to tell people yes or no. I like to tell them, again, like going back to, okay, here's what you could do, here's what you might enjoy, and here's why you might not enjoy this.
the possibilities.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's, and and then it kind of, yeah, it puts the power in their hands. Then,
exactly. Yeah, because that's where it should be. And I remember what it was like doing that too. I remember what it was like being like, I'm totally lost, and going to different readers and trying to get answers. And it's like, no one ever told me be an astrologer. No one ever told me any of the things that I've done, like, you should be doing this. So it's like, I don't mind helping guide people and helping say, yeah, I think you could do this because of this and this and this. But again, I don't want to steer them too far in any direction that they miss something they could have discovered on their own.
yeah, yeah. I, I, I totally agree. um, do you want to? I know that we talked about doing like personal anecdotes about? Do you still want to do that?
Sure.
Okay.
I
So
mean,
if you want
yeah,
to
sure.
share a little bit, a little bit from like your own chart, like the way you feel like it illustrates.
Sure. Yes. So in my chart, I have Virgo rising and I have Gemini on the midheaven. So Mercury is the planet that rules my midheaven. And I have Mercury in Sagittarius conjunct Saturn. And so for Gemini, we see like things like speaking or working with communications. Mercury also rules shipping and receiving.
Mm-hmm.
So like jobs for Mercury also are things where you're going back and forth, like tour guides and stuff like that. And then when we think of Sagittarius, Sagittarius kind of makes it bigger or makes it more dealing with something more global, dealing with something maybe foreign, dealing with the metaphysical possibly. And so some of the jobs I've had, just to use those examples, oh, we should talk about the fact that Saturn is conjunct Mercury. There's some other planets in the same sign, but Saturn's really close. So Saturn rules things like that are heavy. It rules hard work.
Mm-hmm.
And things that are like big and heavy. So, one of the jobs I've had in a couple of different jobs is I've worked at a trucking company in shipping and
Oh,
receiving. Yeah, I worked at
ah,
two different trucking companies. One was cross border, so it's dealing with crossing the
ah,
border. So that's the Sagittarius part. And the other one, everyone else spoke a different language.
oh,
So it just kind of blows me away how like very accurate astrology can be. And then another job that I've had as well, there was a time when I lived in Sedona, I worked at a, oh, what's it called? At like a company that did like tours, metaphysical tours. And so I was
oh,
administrative. So of course the Virgo rising kind of makes it more administrative, more like dealing with the data, sifting through it and stuff. Um, than maybe someone with Gemini placements in their career who had, not without the Virgo side. But yeah, so I did that as well. So it was like booking tours, but it was in Sedona and it was for like the metaphysical tours, like the chakra tours and the, tarot and stuff. So um I just think it's fascinating just how many like, oh, and another thing Mercury can be as a clerk, like a clerk. And so Mercury can rule like grocery stores and selling and commerce. So I also worked in two different grocery stores.
yeah,
So it's just so like it's so just very
literal.
accurate. Yes, so literal sometimes.
Yeah, it's really cool when that transpires when you see it like that.
It is. And this is the thing is that for me, I I wouldn't say most of those jobs I found a lot of meaning in, but and this is where I think there might be a misconception that like the astrology chart is going to tell you what job is meaningful for you. Because none of those jobs I found that meaningful, but they are like very clearly outlined in my chart that that's the kind of work that I would do.
Yeah, it is. And with the Gemini midheaven, it's very like you've done a lot of different things, right?
Yep.
Which is very
Yes.
Gemini midheaven to me. It seems that even that in and of itself is very fitting.
That is so true. I remember learning that early on in astrology and being like, "Oh my gosh, that's me," because I could not I just would get bored and like want to do something else or like think something else would be more fun and just want to switch. And it turns out that's really common for that midheaven. Yes.
Yeah, to be able to try your hand at a bunch of different stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, when you bring the second house into play, being the resource and money house,
Yes.
um, how do you tie all of that into? Because people want to know about money.
Yeah. Like you mean just in general how to tie money in with everything else?
Yeah. with like career stuff, with the works. Yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes um it kind of just factors in like how you approach money. You know, sometimes I see that second house as like the way you are with your money. You know, are you going to be
Sure.
more like quick to spend it if you have Mars there? Are you going to be, if Saturn's there, going to be more quick to save and like not want to spend? Or the moon will do that too. They'll want to like have enough. So
Mhm.
it can be your attitude towards security and your attitude toward money like that. And so we can also see like if you do work that like you get sudden payments, you know, Uranus might be involved or Aquarius might be involved with like even people who like buy businesses and then sell them where it's like you get a
Mhm.
sudden payment at one time.
Yeah.
And you know, also, do you want to deal with money with Neptune? Maybe not. Are you really, really optimistic? If it's like Sag or Jupiter, do you always want more? Um, those kind of things. So I think of it primarily as like, what's your attitude toward what resources or what money you have? But sometimes it can
Yeah.
play into like the type of work you do, whether
Mhm.
it's going to be freelance or whether it's going to be something more committed. Yeah, in combination with all the other stuff.
Yeah. And like I guess especially if you had like the ruler of the planetary ruler of the sixth house in the second, midheaven ruler in the second, things like that. There's like a direct link, direct.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I usually I feel like that's a good thing when someone has
Yes.
like one of their 10th, second, or sixth planets in any of those houses. Usually it's like your money and your work, they go well together. They're connected.
Yeah.
So yeah, usually it
Yes.
doesn't mean it's bad if you don't. I mean, I don't, and a lot of people don't, but yeah.
Yeah, that happens to exist. It is. Yeah, I when I see that and it's like, okay, that's pretty nice. Generally speaking, like you were saying, it is a nice thing to see. Uh, yeah, and like the how I'm thinking about like a like Capricorn on the cusp of my second house. I can be I can be a little what's the word? I can sometimes think I'm more restricted financially than I actually am, or limited than I actually am. I think.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, that would make
And
sense.
sometimes I actually have, but
Wait, what?
like, sometimes I actually have been, and then sometimes it's more of like a perception thing.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think that's kind of a natural thing, but usually you're also going to be usually you're going to be like good with the money you have, or you're going to be more
Yeah,
like, so it's like, it can feel bad to you, but the outcome is going to be that you're not going to waste your money usually.
yeah. I try really hard not to do that. Like it is. It's like okay, right. That is true. Do you ever pull asteroids when you look at this kind of stuff or
Not as
anything?
much. Not as much. I mean, occasionally I'll use them, but I'm not as often. I know you do though. I know you do
Not
a lot of stuff with like asteroids.
I do. I was just wondering, like, if somebody came up with some job or something that they were wanting to know about. If you ever like, I don't know if there happened to be an asteroid for that job because there's like asteroids for fucking everything. If if you ever pull it and just see kind of what where it pops.
Honestly, no, but maybe I'll have to start trying that and see if I got anything.
Sometimes it comes up with some really interesting shit, and you're like, oh, well, how about that?
That's a good point. Like, yeah, that is a good point because you're right. They do have an asteroid for pretty much everything.
Mm-hmm. They do. It's crazy. There's like, it's like, oh, I didn't know they had an asteroid for that. Like, yeah.
Totally.
What else do you bring into play, if anything?
Okay, so 10th house, second house, sixth house are going to be like the first thing we look at for career. But I'm still going to look at the sun, moon, and rising to see what's the personality like, right? Because if you love freedom, but your career planets are all about responsibility, then we have a little bit of a problem. You know what I mean? So to see what those conflicts are, and that can kind of help me see, like, do you love or hate your job? Is your personality completely different than all your career stuff, or does it flow well together? And then I do think of the rising as more of a strong career indicator than, let's say, the sun or the moon. But I'm also going to look at what house is the sun and the moon in. So even just the house of the sun is going to kind of give us an idea, is that person going to want attention? And I'll consider, what's the person asking? You know, if they're like, can I do social media? And I see their sun is in like the 12th house or the fourth house, I'm like, you can, but you might not, you know, there might be a little bit of a harder time getting attention with those placements. That doesn't mean you can't, but you might need to like collaborate or some, you know, get creative about it or something. So, I mean, I'm going to look at all of the chart, like all, and then even like Mars and Venus and Jupiter and Saturn, kind of put it all together. But that's kind of, you know, that's kind of the gist of it. If I only had 10 minutes, I'd just go to the midheaven first and then the second and sixth houses.
Do you ever do you ever find that like what, because I have seen this before and it's kind of, it can be kind of tricky when like but it doesn't happen often. When the work that the person like how they work, like the sign on the cusp of the sixth house, like how they might work, what kind, it seems to be very disconnected from the 10th, from the midheaven or from the ruler. What do you do in situations like that? And again, I don't see it very often, but I have seen it before. I'm like, wow, this is kind of, this just feels kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, like a disconnect.
Yeah, I in that case, usually I'm going to try to look for a connection. So I'll look to see, are there any planets trining the midheaven? That's another place that I look if I can't find the connection. And I mean, at that point, you know, if the sixth house is messed up or whatever, or it's not connected, I'm going to ask them, do you get enough pay for the work? Do you feel like you're working all the time, you don't get paid for it? Do you feel like you're not appreciated enough for the work you do? Because that's kind of a big sixth house problem, is that you can pour energy into that thing, but it doesn't necessarily reward you. So, and that's how, you know, I'll kind of see, if someone has had to work on that whole concept of like giving more than they get back. But then, yeah, I'm just going to try, usually at that point, try to find what is the connection. And I might even start, if I can't find anything good anywhere in those, you know, anything that's like a real good opportunity, I'm going to start to look at the eighth house ruler and maybe the 11th house ruler, because those also kind of deal with money in different ways, to see if there's a workaround somewhere.
Yeah, they're also the legacy houses, so it kind of, it makes sense to bring them in as well. Yeah, yeah.
Right. Well, and the 11th being the second from the 10th. So it's like the money from the work you've done that might be outside of that sixth house. So money from things you've been recognized for, or things that are more visible, whereas the sixth house is probably going to be just any work you've done. And again, it might be work you do that is you don't get paid for too. It goes in the sixth house as well.
Yeah, that makes sense, because yeah, the sixth house can also be like volunteering and charity type stuff as well that you might not. And it's also unequal relationships, like what you're talking about, like with the not getting paid enough, or or those kinds of, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then like with the eighth house, it might be more like um, either like straight up taxes or accounting or managing people's money, but or just getting money from people who isn't your work, you know? And some people have hangups
Yeah,
about that because they're like, I want to make my own money. But if your chart says you can get money from other people, well, then maybe that doesn't mean you can't make your own money. Maybe it means you'd be really good at doing affiliate, you know, or other
yeah,
things like that. So I'm always going to try to find something good,
yeah,
something positive they can just not just see about their potential, but like ideas on how to kind of work with
yeah.
those things they may not have thought about.
brainstorming ideas and things. Yeah. Yeah, because people tend to be harshest on themselves,
What on
right?
themselves?
Or harshest. Like they tend to be harsh on themselves, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
people that know a little bit about, how to read a chart, even if it's just, small amounts, tend to be more harsh on themselves than necessary. So they don't need to be oftentimes don't need to be going to somebody that's also harsh on them. I don't think so, you know what I mean? I think it's a better way to approach it is to try to, okay, so let's try to work with what we've got here. Um,
Well, and sometimes I will too. I will talk about the challenges, and that usually tends to feel good to them anyway. It feels validating
yeah,
usually, and
yeah,
even just seeing, oh, you have Saturn here, which means when you were younger, this probably didn't open up very much, even if you tried. It can be a little bit of a validation to the person that like you're not really doing anything wrong. It's just there's going to be timing on this. So I
yeah,
think, yeah, I think that it's balancing it and trying to bring enough of the good and the challenges to give a, not like not toxic positivity, but still help the
yeah.
person see what's possible, or like you said, a lot of my clients are really hard on themselves, and they think they see they don't have planets in a house and they think that means something bad, which it doesn't. Or
No, it does
they
not.
hear one thing on some astrologer thing about how, I don't know, like something, and it's like there's all these other good things they just don't know how to read because they don't know. So I don't want to miss that stuff. I don't want them to miss out on that.
Yeah, exactly. And like you mentioned, the toxic positivity is not a good thing at all. Like that, that's not helpful either. Validating is important. Things that have happened in their life, ways that they feel like maybe they've had challenges. Like you said, letting them know it's not your fault. It's just, this is, you know, what you're saying makes sense. But yeah, yeah,
Well, and a lot of people that are coming to me, their attitude is like, how do I use this chart to be the best person I can be? And so usually that's what they want. And occasionally I get someone who's like maybe a little bit more lost and a little bit more stuck. And usually when that's the case, we're not doing as much of this is exactly what you could do, as much as like, okay, what is causing you to be stuck? What timing are you in? When will be the right time to start doing this? And usually I almost always tell people now. But I tell them why, like do it now, because either because you have a transit that's supporting that, or because
yeah,
in the future you will and you want to be ready. So my answer is always now.
yeah. No, yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that, especially if it's something that somebody's been like yo-yoing with, wanting to do, like they want to do it. Don't get me wrong, they're not yo-yoing about that. They want to do it, but they've like been yo-yoing with when, and it's like, do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because I know for myself when I do that and then I start doing the thing, usually looking back, I'm like, why did I wait so long to do this? Like it doesn't make any sense, but sometimes we feel it's hard to kind of do the thing you really love because there's more risk involved with having to face it if for some reason it doesn't work. So I think we tend to hold ourselves back the most on the things we want to do the most because it's like there's that little fear inside of like, what if we fail? What if we can't do it? All that stuff comes up.
Yeah, because not to to fail at something that you really love is heartbreaking. you know, um, but yeah, I mean the yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, yeah. Is there anything else that didn't get mentioned in this, that you look at when you look at this kind of stuff for people? Anything that tends to come up that maybe we didn't touch on? Kind of like extraneous things that that yeah. categories or
I guess the one thing that just pops into my head is like, what if you don't like your midheaven? You know, because sometimes people think that, I mean, and sometimes I thought, okay, I thought that in astrology, I was going to find some like perfect path that was like totally wonderful and had like everything would be easy. And I didn't really realize how much the midheaven, like you had said this before we even got on the video. It's like the, actually, no, I think we were talking about something else on that, but forget I said that. But the midheaven is not usually something you're comfortable with, especially if you don't have planets in that sign. And so I think, at least for me, there was kind of a moment where I had to go, I don't really want to do all of those things always. I don't always want to be communicating. I don't always want to be to the point or, you know, other Gemini things. And I think that sometimes it's about being able to say, okay, maybe I don't want this, or maybe this isn't like my favorite thing to do, but if I'm good at it and the world needs it, maybe I can find a way to be okay with that. So I think that there's a combination of finding meaning and fulfillment at the same time as kind of aligning with our career, because sometimes the reason we're feeling like we lack something in career isn't because we're in the wrong job. It's because the other things in life maybe aren't fully in place where they need to be. Um,
uh-huh.
so I
Absolutely.
think like being able to work with it, even if you don't like your midheaven, it doesn't mean like it's okay if you don't know how to deal with that energy or if it feels uncomfortable or it's not natural.
How how would you recommend somebody become comfortable with the midheaven?
I would say maybe look for how when you express that energy in your career, it helps people. Look for how, you know, look instead of looking at it like, how do I have the career that makes me the happiest? Maybe trying to see, and I'm not saying you have to do something you hate, but finding the beauty in that thing, even if it's not like perfect. And I think that's true for everything, but it's like there's always going to be stuff about your job you don't like. I mean, every job
Mhm,
has pros and cons,
mhm,
and I
mhm.
think as spiritual people sometimes, you know, we'll throw the baby out with the bathwater where we think like if it's not always perfect or if it's not always like 100% the best day ever, that means it's not the right thing. And so I think that's the caution is don't not do a whole field just because you don't like a few of the people you work with or something like that. I think that's the advice I would give.
That's very good advice. Yep, very good advice. Well, anything else?
No, I think we
Because I feel like
covered
this is
it.
such a big topic. I don't want to lose. I don't want to miss any. It's such a big fucking topic that I don't want to miss anything. One thing I might bring up too. Do you ever work with Do you work with like the lot of spirit?
I haven't ventured into lots yet. It's something I kind of want to learn at some point. I know you do though. I know you work with the lots and have some videos on that.
That is one thing I might, because that's like things that we will. There's a which is I feel like that can be worked with too in terms of career. I feel like it can.
Did you say things that we will?
Yes.
Like we
Yes.
will
Whereas
into
like
existence?
yes.
Okay.
Yes. That we yeah, that we will into existence. Whereas like the part of fortune tends to be thought of as things that happen, right? Things that just kind of
Yeah,
happen
kind
to
of like
us.
luck, but it doesn't always mean good luck, right? It can be luck either
Yeah.
way.
Yes. Whereas like yeah, and I think the lot of spirit can sometimes not, maybe not always, but I think it can be something that can, since it's some things that we can will into existence.
Would you say that someone wherever their lot of spirit is, like they have a more higher chance of making something happen related to that sign or house based on that?
Um, yes, Generally speaking, yes. Um, Now if it's like squaring the ruler, right? That might make it more challenging. Um, Things like there are things that come into play, but that might make it more difficult. But yeah, generally speaking, whatever house it's in, areas of life by sign, how, yeah, yes.
How interesting. I'm gonna have to look into that.
Yeah, I do, because it is an interesting thing to bring into or yeah, and it doesn't always apply, but it was something I just wanted to throw out there, just yeah. But well, I guess we'll stop this now, but you share where you can be found.
Oh yeah, my website is saffronsageastrology.com. You can also find me on YouTube at Saffron Sage Astrology. I'm also on Instagram at the Saffron Sage and on Facebook, the Saffron Sage.
Go check her out. She's fabulous. Check out the course on career. Um, yeah, yeah. This was like the perfect time to do this.
Totally.
um, well, thank you again so much for being here. I hope you come back soon.
Thank you. It's always fun
And
to talk to you.
it is. It's always fun to talk to you too. I love your vibe. I love how you do things. Yes, it's always a pleasure. And to everybody else, I'll see y'all later.